Another XRP update. Let's get into it. Recently, DTCC confirmed that they are launching a tokenization service in the second half of 2026. So they're putting their securities on distributed ledger technology. And let me explain why that's important. DTCC is the reason that your stock trade settles when you buy, for example, Amazon, or sell a mutual fund, or if you move money into your retirement account. So every single one of those transactions flows through DTCC's infrastructure. They're not a bank, they're not an exchange. They are the plumbing underneath the entire American financial market, which is trillions of dollars every single day. And almost nobody outside of Wall Street knows that they even exist. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and why this is so important. Every single week, I feel like we're hearing more and more news about XRP. I want you to tell me in the chats if you are holding on for dear life, or are you fatigued? Are you frustrated? Are you ready to sell and capitulate your position? Where are you emotionally with this? I would love to know if you are excited about the news, or if it frustrates you that so much news is coming out and still XRP's price is suppressed. Now, I am Camila Stevenson, and around here we talk wealth, and I want to break this down a little more so you can have an understanding of what has transpired recently. Now, let me give you a picture of what DTCC is and why Ripple Prime being inside of it is incredible. It's something that we need to talk about. So let's explain this. Every single time you buy a stock, something has to happen on the back end that most people are not, of course, thinking about because they're not into the backside of making a trade. Well, to help you understand, the trade executes on an exchange, but the actual transfer of ownership, meaning the settlement, well, that happens somewhere else, meaning a clearinghouse, an institution that sits between the buyer and the seller and guarantees that the transaction is complete. That is what DTCC does. And they do it for the majority of American securities transactions every single day. So when you buy a share of a stock from Fidelity or Schwab or any brokerage in America, that transaction runs through DTCC's infrastructure before it is finalized. This is every ETF, every bond, every mutual fund redemption. The scale is almost impossible to comprehend because it is invisible to almost everyone it touches. Now, here's what happened somewhere around March of 2026. Ripple acquired a company called Hidden Road. Hidden Road was a prime brokerage, an institutional financial service firm clearing over $3 trillion annually for more than 300 institutional clients. So Ripple rebranded it to Ripple Prime, and then Ripple Prime appeared in DTCC's NSCC directory. Now, that means that Ripple Prime is now operating inside the same clearing infrastructure that Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase use every single day. And that is operationally with XRP Ledger integrated into its framework for faster settlement finality, with also RLUSD, Ripple's stablecoin, approved as collateral within the same structure. And then DTCC confirmed that they're rolling out a tokenization service in the second half of 2026. So they're going to record securities on distributed ledger technology while keeping their existing centralized systems intact. So the goal is going to be, of course, faster settlement, easier asset transfer, lower costs, more efficiency across the post-trade process altogether. Now, think about what that combination really means. The institution that settles American securities is building tokenization infrastructure, and the company whose technology is already embedded in that institution's clearing operations is Ripple, with XRP Ledger as the settlement layer. Now, this didn't happen, of course, because Ripple got lucky. Hidden Road was a strategic acquisition specifically designed to place Ripple inside institutional clearing infrastructure. The XRP Ledger integration was very intentional. The RLUSD collateral approval was very intentional. Every step of this was built toward exactly this moment. It is strategic. And here's what I want you to understand about why DTCC's story is different from even other XRP institutional announcements that you may have heard. Well, most of those announcements are about adoption. A bank exploring XRP, a company testing the ledger, a pilot program in a specific corridor. And these are very important. But this is infrastructure. So DTCC does not adopt things, DTCC does not run pilots. They are the backbone. So when something is embedded in DTCC's clearing framework, it is being used at scale in the most regulated and scrutinized financial environment in the world. So the people who understands what DTCC actually is, look at Ripple Prime being in that directory and do not think that it's interesting. They think the game has just changed and they understand that. And hey, why do you think institutions are loading up very quietly? Why do you think they're getting their positions in behind your back while you stay scared? Now, here is something else that I do want to discuss. But before I do, I just realized I did not tell you to like and subscribe if you have not already. And I want to say that nothing I share is financial advice. Everything I say is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Always do your due diligence. Now, let's talk about Evernorth and what the native yield on XRP actually means. So while the DTCC story was developing on the institutional settlement side, something else was happening on the XRP ledger that I think is being massively underestimated by most people. Evernorth is targeting what they describe as a multi-billion-dollar annual yield opportunity for XRP holders through native lending on the XRP ledger. And I want to explain what that really means, because the phrase native lending is something that you may not understand. So right now, if you want your XRP to generate any kind of return, you have two options. You can put it on the exchange or a yield platform and trust that third party with your asset, or you can hold it in a cold storage and watch it sit there doing nothing while you wait for price appreciation. Okay. Both options do have a cost. The first one costs you custody risk. The second one can cost you opportunity, meaning your capital is sitting idle in an asset that has real utility and you are capturing none of that utility. Now, native lending on the XRP ledger changes that completely. Before I say this, I want you to know I don't lend out my XRP much. I do have some wrapped in Flare, a very small amount in proportion to my overall position size. And I'm really just doing it to research. I understand that there's a risk in it and that I don't own the XRP at that moment because I'm lending it out. So I do want to say that where I stand, everybody has their own position on this, but I'm just stating the facts. There's two things that you have. And also, I do want to say, when I say custody risk, I don't mean custody risk as in it's not a safe place. I think cold wallets are very safe. But what I am saying is that there are risks to everything. Someone can hack or steal or try to scam you out of your seed phrase. So nothing is 100%. Everything has risk. Now, here's what native means in the context that I'm using it. So the lending happens directly on the ledger itself, not through a third-party platform sitting on top of the ledger, or not through a custodian holding your XRP while they deploy it somewhere else, but on the actual ledger, which means your XRP never leaves the environment you already trust. So this is also, remember, the same ledger that the Japanese proof settles 60% cheaper than SWIFT, and the same ledger that Societe Generale put their regulated euro stablecoin on. And also now the same ledger that DTCC's infrastructure is now connected to through Ripple Prime. So that ledger is now becoming the environment where institutional lending happens natively. Okay. There'll be many options, I believe, as time go on, but just sharing where we are with the ledger. Now, Evernorth is not a small project making big claims. They are holding 400 million XRP and positioning themselves as a liquidity provider within this native lending ecosystem. So when an institution that size commits 400 million XRP to a lending infrastructure on a ledger, they're not experimenting. Okay. They're building a business around a mechanism that they believe is going to operate at scale. Now, here's the part that should make you think differently about what you own. Native lending adds a completely different dimension to XRP. Now, XRP is not just moving through the system, it's sitting in the system as productive capital, generating yield, functioning as collateral, participating in institutional lending markets in the same way that bonds and treasuries function in traditional finance. And that should change the demand picture fundamentally, because when XRP becomes collateral in a native lending ecosystem, the demand is positional, right? So institutions need to hold it, they need to lock it, they need to commit it to lending pools that require it to stay in place for the duration of the lending agreement. This is a completely different kind of demand from a supply and demand standpoint. It's a demand that removes supply from circulation, not just borrows it for a transaction. All right. So this is definitely going to add to that part of the story. And if you put on top of that the whale accumulation data that we already know, 4.09 billion XRP pulled off the exchanges since October, 7 billion leaving centralized exchanges in February alone. The order book is at its thinnest since 2021, and now institutional lending infrastructure launching on the same ledger that is at the same time being integrated in DTCC's clearing operations. You have a lot of these things happening at the same time, supply being systematically removed from the market, and then a brand new category of institutional demand being built that requires XRP to be held and not moved. You got to think of these things and put these pieces of the puzzle together to see where this is going, which is the same direction. Now, when you have that combination that has specific name in market structure, it's called a supply shock in slow motion. And the people who understand that is happening right now before it's visible in the price, they're going to look back and they're going to know that this was the most obvious setup that they've ever watched unfold. Even if you don't know it, they're going to know this was so obvious. And I want you to understand that these stories that are coming together to kind of paint where the direction of XRP is headed is very clear. If you just put the picture together, it's very clear. And we are understanding how XRP is being embedded in the top of the financial system where institutions move trillions. When you're looking at DTCC settlement infrastructure and how they're the back end of every American securities transaction, and Ripple Prime is inside of it. And then you got Evernorth, native lending, which is yield infrastructure, the mechanism through which XRP becomes, again, productive capital sitting inside institutional lending markets. That is XRP functioning at a layer where capital generates return. And we'll see more and more of this as time go on. But I'm giving this to help you to see what is unfolding in real time, regardless of what the price chart is doing. I get that it's sitting somewhere that a lot of people don't like, but I come here and I let you know what's happening so you can strengthen your conviction for those who want to hold. And for those who think it's a FUD and a scam and all of this other stuff, hey, sit and watch the show because it's happening right in front of your face. Get your popcorn out and watch the show and cry when it's all said and done, because you weren't one of the ones that positioned yourself in the middle of this entire ecosystem, in the middle of this entire global reset that's being formed right in front of your face. Okay. And so I did just want to share with you what's happening and what the new current situation is day to day, week to week, month to month, as institutions find its way integrated into the ledger. Now, let me take a moment and explain something else, because everything that we have covered with the settlement infrastructure, Ripple Prime, clearing operations, Evernorth, native lending, all of it is being built inside a regulatory framework, compliance driven, institutionally structured. And the people that are building this are not building it casually. They are building it to last. And they should show you a model of what should be done. Because my question that should be sitting with you even at this moment is whether your structure is as intentional as the infrastructure being built around the asset that you are holding. Because here's the reality. A lot of people are going to lose their money to taxes. The IRS doesn't care about a DTCC story. They don't care about Evernorth native yield. They don't care about Ripple Prime inside clearing infrastructure. But when the price reflects all of that, and infrastructure always catches up to price eventually, they're absolutely going to show up for the percentage that you owe them. And if you don't set something up where you can avoid that, when you have the option to, then you are just going to give a big chunk of your money away for no reason at all, when you can have some reserve that can experience the appreciation and you don't have to give it to the IRS, right? So I do keep a significant portion of my XRP inside a Roth IRA through I Trust Capital, not because I know exactly when it's going to move, but because when it does, I do want to keep every dollar that it appreciates inside that structure to myself. Okay. I don't want a tax event. I don't want to calculate what I owe before I can redeploy. So this is why I keep a portion of that there. I also hold gold and silver in the same account, backed by real gold and silver. And these are real assets that are alongside digital assets inside one structure built for exactly the kind of environment that we are in. And while the prices are still low, I continue to dollar cost average, and I continue to add to my position in both accounts. There's the Roth account and the premium custody account as well. And in that one, I am long-term minded and I accumulate there as well. It is a closed loop system, so no one hacks or tries to steal your assets. And there is talk about potential opportunity for yield. Again, we have to wait till some of these regulations are set in place. Now, the good part is that I want to mention this. They are now going to be adding ETFs and stocks to their Roth account. So be on the lookout for that. I believe it'll happen sometime summer of 2026. So go ahead and get that account open, because if there is a pullback in the stock market, you can also leave a little room to get some stocks at good prices, or you can keep it completely um, geared towards your digital assets. You know, I'm under the impression that digital assets, especially XRP, will appreciate much farther. It will have a better asymmetry move, but at some point you can even along the way take profits and reinvest if that's what you want to do. All right, so there's different strategies for different people. Now the link is in the description for that. There is a $100 funding bonus when you do fund the account. And if you do want to know how to think about your total positioning, how much XRP relative to gold and silver, relative to your financial picture, your strategy, your tax implication, your structure, how do you protect your assets? What's the game plan to put in place? And how do you get that framework? Then that is definitely what my one-on-one coaching is for. And also my community. I walk you, I guide you, I coach you along the way. And I'm telling you, everybody is making tremendous strides in our community. And so if you are interested in that, the link is in the description also. And I just want you to go ahead again and like the video, subscribe if you have not already. And don't forget to let me know if you are feeling empowered by everything that's going on, or are you feeling frustrated? I would love to know where you stand with all of this. Share this video with someone who needs to understand XRP, and who needs to understand that there are other assets out there that a lot of people still have not even heard of, that could really allow you to have the opportunity to create generational wealth. And as always, I want you to stay wise, stay wealthy, and I'll see you in the next video.